to support Murderific. Subscribe to the podcast on iTunes, Spotify, Podbean, or wherever you listen. Follow me on social media on Instagram at Murderific Podcast or Twitter at Murderific BPC. Like what you hear? Rate us 5 stars on iTunes and tell a friend.
Hello and welcome to the Murderific True Crime Podcast, featuring your host, Bernadette.
Content warning. The Murderific True Crime Podcast contains offensive language and will have information about kidnappings, torture, murder and sexual assault. It is inappropriate for children or the faint of heart.
Welcome to Murderific episode 22, and my guest today is Greg.
Hello, everyone.
I haven't seen Greg in 100 years.
Oh, easily.
Maybe I see you once a year, but...
Yeah, usually at a St. Paddy's Day gathering in wonderful Waterville, Maine.
Yeah, and he's into true crime, so we're going to do this. The episode is about Anatoly Slivko, who was a sexual sadist, pedophile, murderer, and necrophiliac. He's got all those things going for him. He was a Soviet killer who was convicted of killing 7 people near...
I'm going to say that's Novomossk.
Russia, right. Between 1964 and 1985. 2 decades he was at large. He loved to molest young boys at his youth club. He would trick them into putting ropes around their necks as experiments, and all for his need to be sexually aroused, because why else do serial killers do their thing?
Can you tell me in what world putting a rope around your neck is a trick of any kind?
No.
I don't get it.
I don't get it either. He lived during this time like a normal man. He was very ordinary. He was married, a father of 2. His kids were devoted to him, and he was devoted to his family, and also devoted to his group of kids at his children's club that he ran. But he used this position of respect to keep well hidden his desire to molest, rape, and decapitate children, boys, and set them on fire while filming the whole thing, so he was the original snuff film type of guy. He was a monster living in plain sight.
Anatoly was born in December the 28th in 1938, Izurbash, Dagestan, the Soviet Union, near the Caspian Sea. This area was recovering from a massive famine at the time. Okay, so Anatoly had insomnia as a boy. He was weak, and he looked emaciated. He hated his appearance. He was bullied at school because his father was in the war against Germany, but was imprisoned and returned home to ridicule for him and Anatoly also. Anatoly had severe urinary tract infections as a child, which made him a bedwetter.
This kid has problems.
Yeah.
Serious problems.
I wonder when it's going to end. There's so many things here. I was reading he had hydrocephalus, which is cerebrospinal fluid on the brain, which causing pressure in your gray matter, and badly, apparently. As a teenager, he had erectile dysfunction. He was ashamed of himself and stayed isolated. He tries to get into Moscow State University, but fails the entrance exam. Then he becomes a telephone operator in 1960 at the age of 22.
Despite Anatoly's serious problems, he started gaining local celebrity status because he began making amateur documentaries about German atrocities in World War II. So I imagine looking at that stuff 24/7 probably fucked him up a little bit. Just like reading true crime stuff 24/7. He began running a youth club named Shurgid, similar to the Boy Scouts in the United States. The children and the teenagers could come and study or hang out with their friends. Anatoly's younger sister set him up with a woman named Ludmila when she saw he was having a hard time socially with girls. Even though Anatoly knew that he was a homosexual, he did get married in 1963. In fact, him and his wife did not even kiss one time during their courtship, so I don't know what to say about that.
It seems like even during that time, we've learned that people weren't openly affectionate.
In the 17 years that they were married, they had sex less than a dozen times. 2 of these times resulted in 2 sons. He said he never felt sexual arousal or satisfaction being married. Of course not, because he was gay.
Right?
In this, quote, normal life he had, He had been a school teacher, but he kept getting switched school to school because of reports of sexual assaults on young children. So he wasn't homosexual, he was a pedophile. Let's get that straight.
At age 23, Anatoly witnessed an accident where a drunk driver on a motorcycle swerved into a group of people and fatally injured a young teen. That teen was wearing a young pioneer's outfit, so a school uniform, a crisp white shirt, polished shoes. And the Young Pioneers, that was a youth club in the Soviet Union for kids age 9 to 15. That existed between 1922 and 1991. Very similar to the Boy Scouts in the United States.
I just want to give a disclaimer here for what's coming up. This is over the top, shocking and gory and revolting, so just be warned.
He really starts down the road here. Anatoly later said the boy experienced convulsions in his death throes as the smell of gasoline and fire permeated the air. And for some reason, this stuck to Anatoly's psyche, and it sexually excited him. And he began to have fantasies, and he would relive over and over this experience. Later in life, he explained, I felt an attraction to the boy for the first time in my life. There was a lot of blood, gasoline on the asphalt, the smell of the gasoline, the fire. I suddenly felt a desire to hurt a young boy like him. The feeling haunted me, and I had to move far away to make the desire disappear.
So yeah, I don't even get that. Most people would see an accident, they would be horrified, and not become sexually aroused by that.
It seems like his empathy was certainly misplaced. You see something happen tragically to somebody, you generally I have a visceral reaction. I don't understand how he couldn't have.
5 to 6 months after this accident, he had an ejaculation during sleep, and the same excitement rose again and consistently pursued me, he said. So it was something that he could not stop thinking about. He was obsessed.
But clearly moving away didn't help.
Right. He began some experiments. Beginning in 1963, Anatoly began exploiting his position running a children's club to begin grooming boys to use in his sick fantasies. He had an endless supply of victims and began his experiments with them. About 2 times a year, he would choose the perfect specimen, a boy aged 12 to 17 who was short and would be wearing the Young Pioneers uniform, just like the boy he saw die earlier. Anatoly would gain the boys' trust and tell them that they were going to be in a movie. These kids are like 12 years old, so they probably were pretty excited about that. He would tell them about experiments to stretch their spine for better health, and because the kids were so gullible and young, they went along with it. Anatoly would tie them up and then even put a rope around their neck. And he would tell them that they might go unconscious, but don't worry, he would revive them. He would tell them not to eat for hours before the experiment, and that was to prevent vomiting. I just can't imagine being that gullible, honestly. Maybe because it was a long time ago, but if someone asked me to put a rope around my neck, I'd be like, fuck no.
But even at that age, I mean, we were pretty well tempered as children to look up to people in authority, whether it was church groups, parents, police,
Cults.
Anything. Cults, hey, you don't say. So, in some respects, to my way of seeing it, they really did trust him.
Right.
However, the aforementioned rope around the neck, that would throw a flag, I think.
Before the experiment, Slivka would buy a new uniform for the boy, and then he would shine their shoes, because on top of every other fucked up thing we've already said, he also had a foot fetish. Not that foot fetishes are bad, I'm just saying that, on top of the love of burning flesh, and just throw in foot fetish in there.
Right, you could have just stayed with the foot fetish and everything would be all right. Okay, so once the boys would fall unconscious, and I feel like he said they might, they did.
Yeah.
Every single time. He would take their clothes off, molest them, take a video of the whole thing. He would arrange the bodies in suggestive positions and masturbate. Then he would ejaculate on the boys' shoes. So this all started in the summer of 1964. He continues his cycle of abuse, freaking weirdness, 1964 to 1985.
It's a long time.
Over 22 years, Anatoly had 43 boys take part in his experiments. 22 years, 42 boys a year, on average.
Mm-hmm.
What if this was like summer camp kind of thing, or if it was a year-round
Maybe
camp?
like only twice a year he would find the perfect boy.
I see. That does make sense. In 36 cases, after he photographs and videotapes the scene, Anatoly repeatedly masturbates, and then he would revive the boys, or attempt to, as we'll see.
Yeah, so 36 boys lived, basically, out of those 43.
You know, it's interesting to me because we live in this. We watch this. It fascinates us. But when you're sitting here reading it and really putting it out to the world,
yeah,
it baffles my mind. Anatoly would tell the boys not to talk about it.
Top secret.
Top secret. And since they were unconscious, they couldn't remember anything anyways and went back to their normal lives. Most of them were luckily oblivious to what had happened. They were unconscious, so there was no memories formed.
I always wonder about that. Say you're molested and you're 3 years old, and you don't know about it. You don't remember that. So, but it probably affects you later in life. So maybe if you're unconscious and that happens to you, maybe that would affect your life. I'm not really sure.
I think that our deeper mind is aware of everything.
Right.
There's a lot going on there, and how can that be missed?
And when molestation was not enough for Anatoly, he became violent. He started murdering. For 7 of the boys, when they were unconscious, Anatoly decided to dismember their bodies, pour gasoline on them, and set them on fire to recreate the traffic accident that he saw when he was younger. So he just had a fantasy when he was younger and just relived it over and over and over again. Slivko kept the boys' victims' shoes as a trophy. He photographed the whole process and filmed it. He would take the film home and develop the photos in his home lab. And of course, he would use these photos to masturbate to until he decided to molest or kill again. So this was like his whole life, basically. The family's a farce. The job's a farce, just to get victims. That's what I think.
Everything's constructed to fulfill his fantasy, and it's interesting reading this and watching the progression. First, he starts with experiments, and finally now he's dismembering, burning. Definite progression to what he really wanted to do.
Yeah. We are going to talk about the murders, but we're only going to use the victim's first name because all of these victims are from Russia, and I don't want to butcher the last names and disrespect them, so I'm not doing this to be lazy or omit the last names. I'm doing this out of respect.
These names are hard. Anatoly's first murder was on June 2nd, 1964. He killed a homeless runaway named Nikola. The boy lost consciousness and couldn't be revived, and this all while being filmed and photographed by Anatoly. Anatoly did say that it was an accident. He could not revive Nikola from being unconscious. So he cut the boy up,
right,
burned the body part,
right,
and buried him.
I think that this probably was an accident because this is the first murder, so probably he tried to revive him and he just couldn't. So then he was like, might as well burn him and bury him.
It's my gateway killing. So yeah, it's really not funny. Anatoly, he did get rid of all the evidence, the photographic and film evidence, and Nikola has never been found.
Yeah, so he was scared shitless. He was like, I need to get rid of everything. Murder number 2 was Alexei, who was picked and chosen as the second victim. He was killed in May 1965, less than a year after the first victim. Anatoly's club for boys burned down in a fire, so he began a new club for boys named Shurgid at this time in 1966. With time, his experiments grew even more twisted, if that's believable. In one video, Anatoly puts one of the boys' severed heads in the middle of a circle of severed feet and polished boots. And I did actually see that on video. Like, that's fucked up.
I spent about 5 minutes looking for video content, and I found mostly video podcasts and documentaries. I didn't get so far as to find any of the really gruesome stuff. Mm-hmm. And I think I'm glad I didn't.
Yeah, you can find these online, though. They are very hard to watch. There is one video of one of the boys who is hanging, who obviously was very trusting. This boy put a noose around his own neck, and Anatoly quickly took the chair out from under his legs. There is video of body parts. There is video of the cutting and burning of bodies, and close-ups of kids' feet that are dead. It's pretty fucking horrible, I'm not gonna lie.
I'm speechless.
I know.
I am.
People wonder if snuff films are real, and they are real.
Oh, certainly. You know, we immerse ourselves in this, and it still, to this point, shocks me.
Yeah.
And the connection I want to make is that there's nothing wrong with you and I. We immerse ourselves in this, but we never feel like, hey, let's just watch more gruesome. Let's listen to more gruesome things.
Speak for yourself.
I know. I was just thinking of that irony as I was saying it. But these guys, when they do something, it's on to the next thing.
Right.
What can I do? Now I've done this. That's not so bad. Let me try something a little bit worse.
It's like being addicted to something, maybe. They just get addicted to that rush.
Right.
And then, like, once you've killed someone, I've always thought that once you kill one person, what's to stop you? I mean, you've already crossed that moral boundary. Why not?
Right. There's not an intensity that increases as far as the number of people you murder.
Yeah.
It's once it's done, you've done it, and you're a murderer forever after that. 8 years later, 15-year-old Alexander went missing on November 14th, 1973.
So, 8 years later, I really doubt that he took an 8-year break after killing 2 people, but, yeah.
Right. Yeah, I'm not interested in doing this right now. I'm going to take a little break. I'm going to groom dogs instead. Okay.
May 11th, 1975. Murder 4 happened, and this was 2 years later, so we took a 2-year break, maybe. An 11-year-old boy went missing named Andre. His mother told police that her son had talked about doing experiments in the woods with a man named Anatoly. Police knew Anatoly and that he had won awards for some of his videos, so they didn't think very much about that. Anatoly was very popular with the kids, parents, and community members. He had many honorary certificates for his work with the youth club, so he was well liked and looked up to. So, of course, this mother might tell police, hey, he was with this guy, but they're like, yeah, so, like, he runs the youth club.
Yeah, but he's
normal.
He's a member of society that we trust.
Local newspapers and radio stations published articles about Shurgid, the youth group that Anatoly ran. In the winter of 1975, a prison inmate said that he knew where victim number 3, Alexander, was buried. Police did a search, and they found nothing because this man's claims were false.
So in 1980, another child member of the Shurgid club went missing. It was 13-year-old Sergei. 2 other boys went missing in the same period.
From the same club.
From the same club?
3 boys.
Yep, 3.
Yeah. Here's a clue.
Well, even this first name is going to be tough for me, so bear with me. Vyacheslav?
Perfect.
All right. 15-year-old Vyacheslav was killed in 1982. Not much is known about this victim. We've got a name, and that's about it.
Yeah, that does happen a lot, especially in cases from other countries. I think Russia was blocking that they had any serial killers for the longest time. They wouldn't even admit that that was a thing. Of course, their news is censored, so it's kind of hard to get info sometimes.
Sure, information's power, so don't let it out.
The final victim, Sergei Pavlov, a 13-year-old boy, went missing after telling a next-door neighbor that he was going to meet the leader of Shurgid. This was July 23, 1985. He just disappeared. In November of 1985, a prosecutor named Tamara started investigating, finally, the missing boy, Sergei, the last victim, who directly mentioned that he was meeting the leader of Shurgid. She started looking into the club's activities. Though she had no direct evidence that anything illegal was going on, she just started interrogating the boys who were part of the club over the years. Many of them talked about the temporary amnesia they had experienced during Anatoly's experiments. So she knew something was up at that point.
The light bulb's going off, for sure.
The police realized the boys who went missing were all connected through Shurgid, the youth group. The police checked out the children's club, but found nothing out of place, nothing weird, but one door on it had a sign that said, "Do not enter, will kill." I don't know if, that is there as a joke, why would he put that up? I don't understand, but I wish I could see that sign.
That would be the exact door that everybody would want to go into.
Know. Well, maybe I wouldn't go in there.
I want to know what's behind that door.
Or not allowed. I'd be like, I'm in there.
Mm-hmm.
Behind the door was a dark room. The police found knives, axes, ropes, rubber hoses, very shocking photographs and films that happened to have on them torture, murder, and dismemberment. And it was videos and pictures that Anatoly had kept for 20 years. Now, seriously, why would he keep all this stuff on the Shurgid premises?
Clearly, he felt very secure.
Maybe it was locked. It probably was locked.
Well, it says, don't enter, I'll kill you.
Right,
yeah,
right.
So
Same thing.
That's enough, right? So was this a dark room, as in, I mean, because it's kind of a, what is that, a double entendre, is what they call that? Was it a place where he did film?
Yeah.
So Anatoly was arrested.
No way.
Yeah. Yeah. After a long inquiry of many boys.
20 years worth of boys.
Yeah, and a lot of them did survive. He was arrested at his home on December 28, 1985. And, I'd like to take an opportunity to point out that Anatoly was a person that was well respected in the community. The police were notified. They blew it off because of his status.
That happens all the time.
It happens all the time.
Now.
But what's interesting to me is that the prosecutor, by the way, happened to be a woman, had that intuition that there's something more going on here.
I think the more normal a person is, like, the scarier they really are.
Yeah?
That's my philosophy.
He was formally charged later with 7 murders, 7 counts of sexual abuse, and 7 counts of necrophilia. In January and February of 1986, he led the police to the bodies of his victims, but he couldn't find the body of the first victim. Yeah, that first kid, burned and dismembered and buried, couldn't find him.
He lost him.
Lost him. Anatoly told the police he never picked up boys older than 17 because it wouldn't fit into his fantasies of reliving the death of the young teenager he had seen burning to death earlier, before his career as a killer started. And the final reason is very important to me. It sticks out. He didn't want anybody strong enough to fight him off.
Of course not. There is some video footage. I saw it, and there was one boy who was, trying to fight him off, and he, kicked off a tree, which was horrifying, and that probably scared Anatoly to go for younger victims. He had to be in control.
So the profile of the age, he had to put some thought into it.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't just, I prefer this age. There was a reason behind it, and it was their weakness.
Yeah. In June 1986, Anatoly was sentenced to death. He was held on death row for 3 years. In 1989, police asked Anatoly for help to get information on an unidentified serial killer who had killed 29 victims by that point in Russia. Anatoly gave them his thoughts on how serial killers like himself function in society. He told them that the killer probably killed because it was the only way he could get an erection and sexual release. And come to find out, that was totally true. The serial killer the police needed help with turned out to be Andrei Chikatilo, who was arrested in 1990 and was convicted of killing 52 people. And that serial killer also killed children, but he could not have a normal sex life. So he could only ejaculate when he murdered. So obviously keep murdering.
I'm shocked to silence.
Yep.
So, retribution. The execution.
So they interviewed him about the serial killers, and then they were like, all right.
Right, yep, okay, that's done. Let's go let's go over here. We got a sandwich for you. And they proceeded to single shot to the back of the head. He was age 50 at the time of his death.
So he got off pretty easy, I think.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, I suppose we shouldn't condone torture as retribution, but hey, listen, guy was rotten.
Yeah, if I had to pick a way to go, that might be the way that I would pick, honestly.
It's interesting to know there are many other serial killers operating in the Soviet Union at the same time. Of course, Anatoly's crimes overlapped with Andrei Chikatilo, but also a killer named Boris Guskov, who murdered 5 women in Moscow from 1964 to 1968. He was executed in 1975. So another murderer named Alexei, he was murdering women with his girlfriend's help. Then he would cannibalize them. There was 7 of these women.
Yeah.
And this happened in Tatarstan.
And there were more. I could have added more. There were lots of serial killers at the same time in Russia. Was Anatoly born evil? It's hard to say if Anatoly was mentally ill before these things happened, or if the accident that he saw caused trauma and became a trigger for him. I think that's what happened. He became messed up seeing it, And for some reason, violence and sex became intertwined in his mind. And pretty much it was all downhill from there. Like, that's what turned him on. And so he had to get that no matter what.
That's what he went after.
And I think the moral of this story is you really shouldn't trust people that are in positions of authority. Just because they're in a position of authority, don't trust anyone, people.
The most likely person to take advantage of you is somebody that you're programmed to trust.
Yeah, of course.
Whether it's a parent, a relative, the librarian.
Right.
We're just absolutely inundated with respect your elders, positions of authority, trust the clergy.
Yeah, and you really shouldn't.
Clearly you shouldn't.
Yeah. Thank you so much for listening to episode 22 of Murderific, and thank you, Greg, for being a guest. You did amazing.
This was wonderful. Are
you into it?
I love it.
You're going to come back?
If you ask me.
Bye.
Thank you.
I wanted to read the names of my patrons. There's For Justice, which is Mary and Rod Small, and Ainsley Vanderbosch, and also Casey Kucher, Denny Capiz, Fried Wizard, Greg Gallagher, and I definitely have some new people that I want to mention. There's Gemma, My Podcast Addiction, Joseph Johnson, and I wanted to let Joseph know that I don't have your address, and I'd like to send you some merch, so just reach out to me on Patreon or Twitter or Instagram, wherever. Karen Parker and Kaylee Lyons, and also, I'm not sure how to pronounce this, but Marinelli Riviera, I believe, who's better known as Blue by Nature, Nicolette Kilman, who's also new, and it says Rachel here, and Sharon Jordan, who's been here since the beginning, uncovered the podcast, War Baby for Murderous Minors. So thank you guys very much. You know that every dollar goes back into the podcast. Hopefully one day I can do this full time. It's a dream. I wanted to read some reviews that I've gotten recently. One from Snow Penny that says, "You go girl, good stories. Appreciate all the work you put into each episode." And also Woohoo36, and it says, "Great podcast from over at Bad in the Boondocks," which is another true crime podcast. And I'm pretty sure this is my first 1-star review, so it says, "Great podcast, except for the unnecessary vulgar language. Sounds unprofessional and sophomoric at best because of this. Yes, this review is helpful. No, I will not stop swearing. I am sorry, Pam Kate." And that's that for this month. Please subscribe to Murderific True Crime Podcast on iTunes or where you listen to podcasts. Please leave a rating and an honest review for Murderific True Crime Podcast. Support Murderific by going to Murderific on Patreon and contributing. It will help with website and production costs, and you'll also be helping a small business to continue. Your contribution, even $1 a month, will keep us going. The links to contribute are also on murderific.com. Follow me on social media, on Twitter as Murderific BPC or Instagram at Murderific Podcast. Thank you for listening to the Murderific True Crime Podcast. Until next time, we'll be executing podcasts one crime at a time.
If you're going to do something, do it well. And leave something with you. Leave a sign to let the world know that you were there. Have a good day.
Is your true crime podcast obsession giving you anxiety and nightmares? Are murder-centric thoughts leaving you on edge every time you're home alone? Holistic Hemp Healing's all-natural premium CBD products give me relief from my anxiety and have allowed me to sleep soundly without visions of unsolved murders waking me up hour after hour. You can try their CBD products for 20% off just being a Murderific podcast listener They have tinctures, soaps, and edibles. www.holistichemp.life. Use promo code Murderific at checkout for 20% off all of their products.
If you're looking for something different, Murder Mile covers the untold, unsolved and long-forgotten murders in London's West End. It's researched using the original police investigation files, it's presented as a dramatisation, and it focuses on the victims' lives in an honest, detailed and sympathetic way. Murder Mile is about life, not lunatics. So if you love true crime stories about real murders by regular people in everyday places, then Murder Mile is just for you. Murder Mile was nominated one of the best British true crime podcasts of 2018. So if you love things a little bit different, try Murder Mile.
So this person spent quite a bit of time in the commission of this monstrous act.
Hi y'all, I'm Vincent, host of Gone Cold Podcast, Texas True Crime. Each week we take a thorough look at lesser-known unsolved cases throughout the Lone Star State. Hear victim stories as told by their loved ones, and expert insight from law enforcement and medical professionals.
You know, using a hatchet, that's an extremely violent and rageful type of act.
The truth is out there somewhere, and you can help us find it.
You know, before I die, I want to know who did it.
Please join us as we examine forgotten Texas cases. Subscribe and listen to Gone Cold Podcast, Texas True Crime, on your favorite podcatcher.
There are monsters among us.
So, Matt, do you know why we haven't really had any aliens visit our solar system?
Well, no. Why?
Because they looked at the Yelp reviews. We've only got 1 star.
Good.
Good evening, everybody, and welcome to the Graveyard. Thank you for joining us tonight. My name is Adam.
And my name is Matt.
Now, pull up a tombstone or settle into your casket and get comfortable, because this is Graveyard Tales. All right, Matt, how you doing tonight, brother?
Well, I'm doing very well, Adam. How are you?
I'm wondering what are you doing?
I'm using my broadcasting voice.
Oh, okay. Well, I can do that in post. You don't have to.
So if you're a member of our Facebook group, there was a pretty lengthy thread a while back about our voices.
Matt decided
well, maybe I need to sound more broadcasting.
No. You know, Matt needs to get more professional.
Sound like Darn Pardo or something.
Yeah.
You know?
Just let me do it in post. It'll be better that way. So we don't really have much as a intro here for y'all. We got some new Patreon episodes up. So if you're a Patreon member, you will have heard those. If you haven't, go check them out. One of them is I gave you an update on my California trip that I'm back from now. Another one is a Matt episode, and then we got another one that either will be out or is coming out that I did. So go check them out. We're dropping several Patreon episodes because we were so dark at the beginning of this month due to vacations and everything. But if you're not a member, a Patreon member, you can go over there and sign up and get all the bonus content that we're giving you. You know, you can $1 a month, $5 a month, you know, and even at the $1 level, you get all the shows. So it's not like you have to pledge $150 a month to get the shows. You can just do $1 a month and get all our bonus content.
But you can pledge $150 a month. We just want to make that clear.
Right.
You can.
You can. I mean, if you've got that much, we will gladly take that as a donation, but you don't have to. You can get it all for $1.
Yeah. So thank you, everybody that has done that. $1, $150, doesn't matter. Thank you so much. We really appreciate it. But I do want to officially extend one very special thank you to Rebecca. This has been in the group. If you missed the picture, you can go back through and find it. But Rebecca had contacted us a while back about doing some custom shoes for us. And Adam got his pair a while ago, but since I wear clown shoes,
freakishly large feet.
Yes. She had to get my shoes special, but I actually got them in my possession today. They've been sitting in the P.O. box for almost 2 weeks because Adam's been gone and I don't have a key.
Yeah, I forgot to leave my key
to get them. But they're in my possession right now, and they are absolutely phenomenal. I'm just looking at them. I'm just floored. And thank you so much, Rebecca. You are an amazing talent, and to integrate two things that I love, this show and the Grateful Dead, into one design I'm just amazed. So yeah, thank you so much.
They're awesome. I love mine, and she didn't put Grateful Dead on mine, gratefully. I'm not the deadhead that Matt is, but she did do our logo and stuff on mine. So we love them and can't thank you enough, Rebecca. But Matt, what are we talking about tonight?
Okay, so we're going back over the pond again to the UK to talk about two different things that are combined into one thing. The Hellfire Caves, and it's serving as the meeting place of the Hellfire Club.
Right.
Now, I had the Hellfire Club last week. It's a sandwich with like ghost peppers and Carolina Reapers. Then I had the Hellfire something else later that night.
Right, so. Right. The Hellfire butt. Now, if anybody does make that, they need to give us, or at least Matt, credit for that. Right. So TM that, Matt.
I named your sandwich.
Yep. TM. It's a Graveyard Tales copyright. So let's get into this a little bit. Now, y'all all know I'm the history buff here, so I've got some history for you. Now, the Hellfire Caves are in West Wycombe, and we're talking about the England area.
The England area. It's kind of halfway between London and Oxford.
Right. And it's a network of chalk and flint caverns that are in the Buckinghamshire, England area, and they were made famous because of this sordid past that they have. And they're named after the Hellfire Club, which we will talk about here in a little bit. But according to most accepted accounts of the Hellfire Caves, English politician Sir Francis Dashwood commissioned this project in 1748, and it was supposedly to supply chalk for a 5-kilometer road between West Wycombe and High Wycombe. Now, this was supposedly in an attempt to combat poverty in the area, so it would provide jobs to farm workers and impoverished people and all that stuff.
He's making jobs.
Dig
my caves.
Exactly. Dig my flint caves. Well, the workers were employed at like 1 shilling per day, which is enough to sustain a family in that time, to mine chalk and flint, on his estate. Well, they were all dug by hand, so these caves are regarded as an incredible feat of engineering, which they are. I mean, we'll post a picture of them so you can kind of see the layout of them, but they are quite impressive in how far they go and all that stuff. But the layout doesn't look like a normal chalk mine. You wouldn't.
I don't really have any point of reference for a chalk mine, to be honest with you.
I would say it wouldn't have some of these amphitheaters and stuff in it.
Well, true. I would imagine not.
But the tunnel and all of the adjoining chambers and halls were dug a quarter of a mile into the earth, and this was directly beneath a church. Now, the network consists of a main hall, which branches off into rooms such as the, quote, Steward's Cave, a banquet hall, Franklin's Cave, which was named after Dashwood's friend and Hellfire guest, Benjamin Franklin.
That's right. The same one.
Which we will talk about a little later. The tunnel ends in a chamber known as the Inner Temple. Now, this was reached after you had to cross a small underground stream that they named the River Styx. Now, outside the entrance to the caves, there was this fake facade that was built out of irregular pieces of flint, and they wanted it to look like a Gothic church. So the outside of these caves looked like a Gothic church. So none of this sounds like a chalk mine to me.
No.
It seems a little suspicious to be a chalk mine. But walls were also built around the facade to create like a courtyard area for it. Now, the theory that the caves were dug out for mining is pretty questionable because the Chiltern Hills flint bed overlays this area, and you don't have to really mine it like that. All you really have to do is make these little small open flint dells, as they call them. And there's a bunch of them in the area, so you can just kind of dig down and get some. You don't have to go through this extensive network of tunnels. So the question is always asked, could it be that Sir Francis had another reason for creating the underground network of rooms?
Well, of course he did.
Of course he did. So this other reason is most likely the Hellfire Club for their rituals. Now, the Hellfire Club would hold meetings in the Inner Temple, sharing drunken toasts, contests of wits, and some crazy stories that they had. Well, the spirit of the club was firmly pagan, and the gatherings often also included mock rituals and all manner of what they considered bohemian indulgence. This is not like the song. I see a little silhouette of a club.
But he liked the remix.
Yeah. You know? Hellfire Club, Fire Club. So, given the Hellfire Club's anti-establishment thought processes and the literal underground nature of the club, accounts of occult and criminal happenings have sprung up over hundreds of years, but neither history nor the caves themselves lend concrete evidence to any of these stories. But we do have some stories that you might find interesting coming up a little bit later.
Well, it was a secret club.
Right. So if it's holding up to its name, you're not going to know what's going on.
Yeah, they didn't really keep like notes.
I don't blab about our secret club
That's
that
right.
we have.
You know, we're not telling nobody.
No.
Don't write this down.
Right.
It could be used against us.
Exactly.
I mean, because you got to think too, Dashwood was a member of Parliament.
Yeah.
So, you know, having this secret club, and it's not like it was so secret that people didn't know about it, but they had no idea what was really going on. And, you know, I guess in a lot of ways, it was just kind of thought of this super exclusive men's club. But, you know, in the early 1700s, these wealthy people, they did what they wanted, and you really didn't question it. I mean, certainly not for just common folk.
Right.
I mean, and truthfully, they were more worried about where their next meal was coming from as opposed to worried about what some kook on the hill was building.
Yeah, you know? Exactly.
Well, look, he's going to pay me $1 shilling a day to dig this crap out of here. I'll do it.
Yeah, I don't care what it's for.
Yeah.
So we need to talk about the Hellfire Club a little bit. And it started in Ireland, in the Dublin area, and ended up moving to the Hellfire Caves later on. But let's talk about it. So for centuries, the hilltop of Mount Pillier Hill, or Montpellier, as I've heard it pronounced too, which is southwest of Dublin, and it overlooked the city, was occupied by a Neolithic passage grave, which is burial chambers that are covered in stone, usually with a single narrow entrance. You've seen these on the History Channel and stuff when they're doing different segments on Neolithic graves in Ireland. And all throughout the UK area, there was a lot of these. The entrance was normally marked by a large cairn, which is a pile or stack of stones that was made by humans. Now, the vantage point and the view were just too powerful for one 18th century man to resist. So he built his home on the hill. He used stones from the cairn and destroyed the cairn.
Talk about some bad juju.
No kidding, right?
You want a haunted house? That's how you get a haunted house.
Yep, pretty much. Now, many of the locals were terrified that the man had offended the old pagan gods, especially after a powerful storm blew the roof off his new home shortly after construction. So the story goes, in the early 18th century, William Connolly, then the Speaker of the Irish House of Commons and one of the richest men in Ireland, was casting about for a suitably impressive location for an expansive hunting lodge he wanted to build. So south of the city, he found this area that we were talking about, and it's just a beautiful area. It overlooks all of that area of Dublin. Great vantage point you can see. The sight and the views of Dublin is what convinced Connolly that this was where he wanted to build his new hunting lodge, which was named Mount Pillier. Now, during the construction, the workers stumbled upon this cairn that we were talking about. And there were stones everywhere from this passage to him, because that's what they did. They drug stones from, miles and miles away and piled them up in reverence for who they buried there. So this is a very important thing for the Neolithic people that dude is just tearing down. He, quote, recycled the stones and he used them to build the hunting lodge. Well, reportedly, he put one of the biggest stones, the headstone of that cairn, over the fireplace. So it was basically like one of the standing stones that you would see at like Stonehenge or whatever. Mm-hmm. He used this for the mantle of his fireplace in this hunting lodge. So both the standing stones and the cairns were known as these ancient grave markers, but Connolly didn't care. He just kept going.
Yeah, so, I can just imagine he's standing there admiring his new fireplace. Mm-hmm. And guy standing next to him, and he's like, "How do you like my fireplace? What do you think of the mantle?" And the guy just going, "And it's from a grave, man."
Yeah, right.
It's from a grave.
I don't care. It's a good looking stone.
It sounds like a terrible idea.
It sounds like the start of a horror movie.
Yeah.
It does. You picture the guy coming in, breaks apart these tombs and all this stuff, builds his house with it, and then immediately after that, well, he's haunted all to hell, and now we got the movie starting, So
the foolish man built his house out of a grave.
Yep. So shortly after the construction was completed in 1725, this storm that we talked about came through and it blew the roof entirely off of his hunting lodge. Well, all the locals said it was retribution for desecrating that burial site. And I mean, I would think so.
It'd be kind of hard to argue that.
Yeah. Yeah. You just didn't. I mean, look, if I die and y'all build a cairn for me and I've got this big, impressive area, and then some schmuck comes through and puts my headstone on his fireplace, you better believe I'm haunting his butt. I'm not letting that go. I'm going to be knocking the roof off every chance I get. But they said it was, it was retribution from the ancient pagan gods of old. Some even said that it was possibly Satan himself who was getting retribution. Well, neither of these possibilities really disturbed Connolly at all. He was just oblivious. So he promptly built an arched stone roof for his lodge, again using stones from the cairn and all around the site. Now, believe it or not, those stones are still standing today. So if you go to the Hellfire Club Mount Pillier area, you can still see those stones hanging out there. So the pagan gods were mad, but they were not mad enough to be able to blow off the stones.
Yeah. So
I guess if you're going to do it,
they were more just irritated.
Yeah. At that point, they were just like, dude, really? All right, we got you. We got your number. We'll get you. We'll leave your roof up, but we're going to get you. So, believe it or not, Connolly died in 1729. 4 years after the completion of this thing.
Yeah.
So he really didn't get to use it. There's no word on whether it was due to anything suspicious or not. We couldn't find any death records. It's not like 1720s. You really have good death records from that time.
He died.
But if it were me just making a guess, I would say that it may be under suspicious circumstances.
Yeah, I would say.
You know, I mean, 4 years after you build your fancy lodge, you kick the bucket. It's a little suspicious. Well, for several years, Mount Pillier was abandoned for the most part, which really added to the appeal for the Hellfire Club. They began renting the hunting lodge from the Connolly family in 1735. Now, the Hellfire Club originated in London in 1719, but King George I quickly outlawed it. But the royal edict was really no hindrance to these entitled, rich people that were in the Hellfire Club, and it really didn't stop them from engaging in any of the immoral acts that the Hellfire Club had. So Dublin's Hellfire Club was a place for wealthy young gentlemen to drink, gamble, hire prostitutes, and even allegedly engage in, quote, more degenerate activities like animal torture and Satan worship. Now, their motto was, "Do what thou wilt." And some of y'all may know that because it was later used by Aleister Crowley himself. Anybody notice that Aleister Crowley has popped up in a lot of our recent episodes?
He has.
So that may be a sign that we need to talk about him.
He's awful busy these days.
He is, man. He's getting a lot of play in the graveyard here. So we might need to look into him. Now, one of the Dublin Club founders was a man named Richard Parsons. He was first Earl of, it's Rosse, so Roche. I'm pronouncing it all wrong, I know, but it's Southern tongue. Sorry about that. He was Grand Master of the Freemasons of Dublin. So this man is a Grand Master Freemason, and he founds the Dublin Hellfire Club. Just let that sink in a little bit. He's in one secret society, and he's starting another one.
He makes one, it's even more secret.
Even more secretive.
It's double secret.
Yeah. Super double secret. So, also, Sheriff of Dublin, Simon Luttrell, was also a member. Now, the combination of the reportedly cursed location and all of the depraved goings-on from the Hellfire Club quickly led to even wilder stories about the club's activities. So the remoteness of the location meant that few, if any, of the activities could be witnessed or verified, hence why we don't have many stories from them. But that added fuel to the fire for legends about the club. And a lot of the stories that came out from the Hellfire Club actually involved fire. Now, one story states that late one night a priest went to the house to see what was really going on. Now, in one version of the story, when he entered the house, the center of attention was a huge black cat with ears so pointed they resembled horns, and he was sitting in the chair reserved for the devil himself, because every meeting they left a chair open in case the devil showed up. I mean, if that's what you're wanting, you better leave a chair open for him. You might get pissed and blow your roof off, but
yeah, that right there isn't an exclusive Hellfire Club thing. I've heard that before with other
societies.
Other societies that would, they would do things like that. You always leave a chair for the devil,
right?
Something along those lines,
right?
So it was more of a, I don't want to say common practice, but it was for something like this. It was something that you did.
Yeah. Well, I mean, if you're going to be in that type of Satan worship and stuff like that, you need to, I mean, it's just,
you want him to be comfortable.
Right.
Right.
If he's going to show up all the way.
You don't want him standing the whole time.
He comes from, his hooves would hurt after he stood for that long.
Yeah. You don't want to have to put horseshoes on the devil.
No, exactly. See? Can you imagine?
What a crappy job.
Can you imagine being the guy who had to shoe the devil? I mean, I haven't shoed a horse before, but I've had to clean out the shoes after rides several times. So you get up there and you prop that leg up. And I was doing it one time in a little spot. Some of y'all are country enough to know this, but the little spot in the middle of the horse's hoof is called the frog.
Yeah.
And you've got to make sure you don't hit that because it's a nerve bundle. Well, as you're scraping along, you got to go around that and everything to get the dirt out. Well, I missed and I hit that frog. Luckily, the horse was nice enough that it didn't kill me, but I'm squatted down with its leg on my leg and it kicks just enough to throw me against the wall of the stall. Luckily, it didn't make, hard contact with me or I wouldn't be here talking to y'all. But it was enough to let me know I messed up. So if you can imagine hitting the frog on the devil's hoof, you're not going to be living anymore.
That's right.
So, sorry, that was a tangent.
Frog the devil.
Yeah, I just frogged the devil and now I ended up here. So, so the priest, back to the story, the priest immediately sensed evil when the cat started snarling at him. So he threw holy water on the cat. And the cat turned into this devil-like figure and ran outside, burning down the roof as it left. Now, in another version of the story, the priest finds a black cat that had been sacrificed and exorcised the cat's soul. In the third version of the story, the cat was doused in whiskey and set on fire, and then it ran around setting the Hellfire Club on fire. And there's an often repeated story about the Hellfire Club that's of a guy named Burnchapel Whaley. Now, in 1740, one of the principal members of the club was Richard Chapel Whaley. Now, he was at Montpellier enjoying one of the Hellfire Club's drunken parties. Some say there was a black mass performed by a defrocked priest there, but a servant accidentally spilled a drink on him. Now, in retaliation, Whaley doused the man in brandy and set him on fire. As the servant ran through the house, he grabbed a tapestry to try to smother the flames, and eventually the blaze burned the entire lodge. There are tales of black masses and human sacrifices, one which led to the lodge catching on fire and killing several members. There is even a story of the club members kidnapping, killing, and eating a farmer's daughter.
Nice.
So not only are no, that was, you could tell by Matt's tone he wasn't being serious. Not only were they supposedly doing Satan worship practice, but they were kidnapping, killing, and eating farmers' daughters. So if this is true, the debauchery in that group is pretty crazy.
Mm-hmm.
Now, these could be just inflated stories.
Yeah.
Because we don't know for sure, but Matt's got some more stories here in a little bit. But the most famous story involves this mysterious stranger who wandered in one dark, stormy night, because it's always got to be dark and stormy.
Yeah, because that's the best time to go do something like this.
Exactly. He wandered in one dark and stormy night. Should I keep doing it that way? I'm not gonna.
No.
The stranger joined a card game that was already in progress. And at one point, a player dropped his card and bent down to look under the table to grab it. Well, as he looked, he glimpsed the stranger's legs and realized that the man had a cloven foot. When the stranger was confronted, he burst into flames and vanished. So, hello, devil, was that you?
Well, why would he just burst into flames and vanish? Oh, you figured me out.
Yeah.
Well, they were like, yeah, I'm the devil and I'm here. Give me all your money.
Yeah, I mean, that would, if I was the devil, that's what I'd do. I'd be, like, yeah, and you've been trying to get me this whole time. Here I am.
Yeah, I finally show up and this is how I'm treated.
Yeah, you mocking my cloven hoof?
Yeah.
We'll see, give you 4 cloven hooves, I'd
turn you into a goat.
Exactly, or a pig or something. But apparently meetings occurred twice a month, with one annual meeting that lasted a week or more. And that happened in either June or September. But the members addressed each other's? Mm-hmm. What am I don't know.
Each other's what?
We can't, PG show. I can't get into that. But they addressed it on them. And they addressed each other as brothers, and the leader they would call abbot. Now, during meetings, members supposedly wore ritual clothing, which was white pants, white jacket, and white cap, but the abbot wore a red outfit in the same kind of style. Now, legends of black masses and Satan or demon worship have become attached to this club, but a lot of these didn't start getting attached till the 19th century. But people say that female guests, which was a euphemism for prostitutes, were referred to as nuns. So, in a mocking manner of the church and all that, they would consider the prostitutes nuns, and sometimes they would have them dress up in the habit and all that just to mock the church. But Dashwood's club meetings often included mock rituals, items of pornographic nature, a lot of drinking, and a lot of feasting. So it was just a rituals of indulgence.
Yeah.
For these rich people. And whether you want to say they were legitimately trying to conjure the devil or not, that's whatever. But they did have all these indulgent rituals. Now, eventually the Hellfire Club managed to burn Mount Pillier so badly that it was unusable from then on. Well, they stayed in the area. They moved down the road to the steward's house, also known as the Killicky House, and it was also owned by the Connolly family, and they used the Hellfire Caves. Well, their level of activity kind of waxed and waned throughout the 18th century, and when Thomas Buck Whaley died in 1800, the Hellfire Club, which was at that point known as the Holy Fathers, died with him, supposedly. Because there's some talk about it continuing, moving to the Americas, and, it could still be around today, but we don't know for sure.
So, when Dashwood, when the caves were completed and Dashwood began the meetings there, just out of, Dashwood lived in the West Wycombe Manor, and they could travel right there to the caves and have their meetings. And as Adam mentioned earlier, Benjamin Franklin was a friend of Sir Francis Dashwood. And he was even quoted as saying that he felt more at home in the manor above and below ground. So indicating that even Benjamin Franklin had ventured into the caves.
Right.
And as close of a friend as he was with Dashwood, there's no evidence that he was actually a member, but remember that one of the main purposes of the club was to mock the Church of England.
Mm-hmm.
And not being English, it really wouldn't be Benjamin Franklin's gig.
Right.
But
wouldn't care.
Being such good friends with Dashwood, he would be more than welcome to sit in on the meetings and witness and participate in all the crazy goings on.
Right.
So
have a little fun.
Right. So, the caves were built and designed specifically for this. I mean, there's, small theaters, there's private caves, there's the inner temple. there are areas that look like they were built for a purpose, and they were. And the caves are still there today. You can visit the caves. The caves have visitors. You can take tours. You can see everything that was there. But when you take into consideration all of the stories that Adam went over about what the Hellfire Club could have possibly been into, you've got to wonder, what did they bring that they could do inside a cave?
Right.
Away from any kind of prying eyes on Dashwood's own private property. I mean, they could have gotten into some serious stuff.
No kidding.
And a lot of it is documented.
We need caves, Matt.
Yes, we need a cave. But a lot of the goings on are documented. I mean, it is documented of what went on there. Maybe not in such detail that they're going, and this night we conjured the devil.
Right.
But there's a lot of things and a lot of written documents that describe, the dress and the activities and the rituals. But, you can't really have a network of caves constructed by an English baron for his secret club of debauchery and church mocking and paganistic rituals without having some truly odd and fascinating stories of all types.
Right.
Some of them paranormal, some just interesting, and some are just downright hard to believe. But one of those really weird stories involves club member John Wilkes. Now, John Wilkes decided that he would play a prank on his fellow club members, and he somehow obtained a baboon. Now,
how?
Yeah. Now, I'm not really sure how one would procure a baboon in modern times.
Very carefully.
But it seems like in the early 1700s, it would be hard to get your hands on a baboon.
Yeah.
But as the story goes, Wilkes managed to get his hands on this baboon. And anyway, he took the baboon and dressed it up as the devil.
Which you do when you have a baboon.
What else you got to do with a baboon?
Standard practice.
There's no other reason to have one. So his outfit complete with horns and everything. And he put it in a box and he headed off to the meeting. This must have been a big box because baboons are not small.
No, real quick. I'm thinking about this baboon with horns and all that stuff and its big red butt hanging out of the back of it. It's just, I can't help but picture that when I think of a baboon as a big red butt.
And you think about a baboon's face, man. It's kind of creepy looking.
Yeah. And then you put horns on that thing.
If I had to pick an animal, it'd probably be a baboon.
Right.
Okay. So when everybody was good and drunk, Wilkes decided to let the proverbial baboon out of the box, and it promptly jumped on Lord John Montague, the Earl of Sandwich.
Of course.
Yeah.
Of course.
Well, it scared him so bad.
He choked on a sandwich.
Yes.
Oh.
Choked on a ham sandwich. On his Hellfire Club sandwich.
That's the origins of that. And now you know the rest of the story.
All right, good night.
Yeah, we'll see you.
We're done. We can't top that. We didn't even try. And we got to that.
Full circle,
I'm
Matt.
telling you, without trying. We can't write this.
No, if we had written that, it wouldn't have gone that well.
But anyway, so it did. It terrified him. And so he's like on his knees, crying, confessing all of his sins because he thinks the devil is there.
Yep. This one time I pooped in a fountain, and I didn't mean to poop in a fountain, but it happened, and then I enjoyed it.
So I did it again.
Yeah, I did. It was 3 times total. They called me fountain pooper all the way through high school. Boy, this has gotten derailed, hasn't it? So it's late at night.
I'm telling you, we're much later in the graveyard than we usually are.
No kidding.
But you know, these Hellfire Club enthusiasts, these historians that dig back through these records and try to piece together what these meetings were like, they're kind of thinking that if all they were doing was having, these orgies and drinking and just general rakish behavior, why would they believe that the devil appeared?
Right.
Unless they were doing something meant to bring him there.
Right.
So maybe they were. Maybe they were trying to do something. I mean, whether or not they were successful, that remains to be seen. But if they were doing rituals that were to bring about the devil, and this guy panics because a baboon jumps on him dressed as the devil, he thinks, oh crap, it's really here.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe they were involved. You would, if you weren't trying to bring him about, why would you be afraid that he was there?
Yeah. Guilty conscience.
Yeah. So, touring the caves is an interesting thing. So as you walk down through the caves, you notice things like strange faces that are carved into the walls. And you can look at these. I mean, you can look at these pictures. Some of them are very rudimentary. Some of them are more ornate, but there's a lot of them. And they all look kind of weird, or just like in horror. And so you pass these faces, but as you get down even further, you'll find that one of these faces is a carved face of the devil himself. So again, some indicator. And to me, it's either they were really doing this or they were just trying to portray that they were doing this to just whip up some excitement about it.
Yeah.
It's fun to tell everybody we're up here doing these devil worshiping rituals.
Mm-hmm.
But, strange behavior often begets even stranger behavior.
Sure.
So when club member Paul Whitehead died in 1774, he left something very personal to his dear friend, Francis Dashwood. His heart.
Aw.
Yeah.
That's sweet.
Yeah. It couldn't have been like his CD collection or his autographed Steph Curry jersey.
Right.
No, it's his heart. Okay. And apparently he paid him £50 to keep his heart in an urn in the caves. Okay.
Shouldn't take more than 50 pounds.
Yeah. So just to make this story even weirder, Dashwood stored Whitehead's heart in an urn and kept it in its own cave in the network of caves. There's its own private little section, and the urn is still there. Okay? Visitors to the cave were allowed to pass the urn around.
Really?
Yeah. See? Weird behavior?
Yep.
Becomes even weirder. Okay? Until one day...
Hey, look, Ma, a heart.
Shake it, rattle it up.
You can hear it.
You can hear it rattling around in there. So one day, an Australian soldier visiting the caves decided that he was just going to take the heart. Not the urn, just the heart.
So what did he do? Just pocket it?
I guess. I mean, surely it was shriveled up by then.
Yeah.
It looked like a chicken heart all petrified in there. He just pitched it in his hand and shoved it in his pocket. Anyway, he took it and left the urn. So that's why I said the urn is still there, but Whitehead's heart is not. Because, why not? Just take it.
You said that was an Australian tourist?
Yeah.
That sounds right.
Yeah. About 150 years ago.
Yeah.
Took it. Okay.
You Australians are crazy. Even 150 years ago. We love you, but y'all are crazy.
What would you do with it?
I don't know.
Maybe he's going to eat it.
Hey, there you know.
So staff and visitors alike have witnessed the apparition of an older gentleman wandering the caves dressed in period dress. Now, it is presumed that this is the ghost of Paul Whitehead looking for his missing heart. Okay? Now, Susie Carter, a former tour guide in the caves, witnessed an old man walking up one side of the tunnels only to turn around and walk back down the other side. Now, the tunnels were closed at this time, and there was no one else around. So seeing somebody walking from down deeper in the tunnels was a little weird.
That shouldn't have happened.
Yeah, and others have attributed poltergeist-like activity to Whitehead's ghost, including growls, touching, objects being thrown, and this general feeling of unease that you get as you travel deeper into the caves. Now, probably one of the most common ghost stories that you hear from inside the caves is that of Suki. And it's not the character from True Blood.
Dang it.
Adam pulled that on me the other night. Now, she's sometimes described as the White Lady or the Lady in White, but she's generally known by her name, and her name was Suki. Now, Suki was a chambermaid or a barmaid or waitress, if you want to use a modern term, at the local George and Dragon, which was a pub which still exists today. In fact, there are several around the United States that are made after it. They're the George and Dragon.
Yeah.
I think there's one in Phoenix, Arizona, and there's 2 or 3 others. But anyway, so Suki had kind of, taken a shine to a wealthy fellow that would travel back and forth from London and Oxford. And he always made it a point to stop at the George and Dragon. Now, some local boys decided that they kind of liked Suki too. And so they would flirt with her. They would come by to see her, but she rebuffed them every time because her heart belonged to another. Well, now these local boys, they got jealous. And so they decided they were going to pull a little prank on old Suki. So one night they sent her a note signed from this wealthy traveler pretending to be him. Now, it asked her to meet him in the caves so that they could elope. Now, just filled with joy, Suki arrived at the caves later that night dressed in her wedding gown. Now, as she ventured into the caves, she began to hear the same local boys laughing in the distance. Now, she was pretty hot about this.
Sure.
So Suki began to shout and throw gravel at them. Now, the boys retaliated, throwing much heavier stones. One of those stones struck Suki in the head, and it killed her. Okay.
Jeez.
Now, Suki's ghost has often been seen in the banquet hall wearing her white Victorian wedding dress. Now, visitors often report hearing screams and the sound of crying. Other visitors have also experienced being pelted with gravel. Yeah, that's what I said. So Suki's appearances are so common that reports of seeing the Lady in White average about 20 per year.
That's crazy.
That's a lot.
That's crazy.
I mean, for somebody to have an experience at a quote unquote haunted location, that's not unheard of. But to actually witness what is the famous ghost of a place 20 times a year, hell, 20 times period would be a lot.
Right.
20 times a year, that's remarkable. Okay. So, and like I said, she's the most famous ghost there, and for good reason. She's apparently the most active one.
Yeah.
She's not ever gotten over this. Now, Vicky Swallow, who is the manager of the caves, has reported hearing growls while working in the inner temple. Now, although she says she doesn't get scared while she's in the caves, Vicky and the other employee with her say that when they heard the growl, they promptly began singing holy songs as they quickly made their way up to the surface.
Seems like a good idea.
Yeah. Now, Julianne Barlow, who is the assistant manager of the caves, reports that the sighting of lights and orbs are also very common near the entrances of the tunnels. Now, Julianne believes that these may be the spirits of children. Now, the orbs will tend to show up in photographs of younger visitors. So, and there's a photograph of a child taken just outside the entrance to the caves, and there's an orb behind him. And so apparently this is pretty common, which makes her kind of think that the orbs are drawn to the energy that children bring when they visit the caves.
Right.
Other visitors has reported seeing strange lights and shapes that move about in the network of tunnels only to disappear when they're approached. Now, other sightings include that of an old man who appears to be wandering around the caves alone. Now, one story is that of a gentleman who was visiting the caves and wandered a little too far only to find out that he was lost.
Uh-oh.
Okay? Now, listen. I don't ever want to be lost in a cave.
Mm-hmm.
If I'm going on a tour and I'm in a cave, I'm not going to wander off.
No.
This is like, I watched one of those videos when we were doing the Paris catacombs thing, and these dudes getting lost in there. Okay, I'm like getting panicked for them.
Yeah, high anxiety.
So I'm not wandering off, but this guy did. He didn't do what my mother always told my sister and I whenever we went on a trip, like a field trip or whatever. Stay with your group.
Mm-hmm.
It's good advice.
It is good advice.
Stay with your group. Now, the gentleman came across this old man who looked kind of friendly, and he thought, well, he must be a guide. And the old man kind of motioned for him to follow him. So this gentleman followed the old man all the way back to the surface. When they got to the entrance, the old man kind of stepped aside and extended his arm as if to say, please go ahead, exit before me. So when the man exited, he turned around and the old man was gone.
Wow.
Yeah. So,
that's the kind of spirit you want to run into.
Yeah, that's right. Helpful and friendly.
Yep.
But apart from these resident ghosts, there are a lot of people that believe that these rituals that were performed by Dashwood and the Hellfire Club were not just in jest, that these ritual sacrifices were made, possibly even human, and that they could have summoned something that's way darker than friendly ghosts that lead visitors to the entrance or, scorned women who throw gravel at people. So there's a lot of belief that something demonic resides down in those caves.
It's possible.
There's really no evidence that anything just horrific or dangerous has happened as a result of something paranormal in the caves. But so many people report having this just odd feeling. Dizziness is another thing that a lot of people report. They get down and I can kind of see that because the fact that you're way underground,
right?
Just talking about it makes me kind of
disorienting.
Yeah. So I'm not exactly claustrophobic, but I don't like to think that there's not a way out, and that could probably make you a little dizzy.
Sure.
But that's a common thing with haunted locations is just, people feeling nauseated or dizzy or weak or things like that. So, okay, maybe, I could probably see where that would be true. But yeah, I mean, there's an interview, with our old buddy Zach Bagans talking to a local guy who his description is that you feel the energy below your feet. That when you're standing up, on those grounds, that you feel something, almost what he describes as your feet tingling. And he says, now this is not Zach, this is a local guy. He says that he feels the same thing at Stonehenge. That you just feel this energy, emitting from the ground.
Right.
And if you believe that Stonehenge was some kind of like, pagan antenna, for rituals or whatever to bring in energy, to draw energy. And, you start looking at things like the ley lines and everything, now you've got people that are saying, I feel the same thing when I'm here. It makes you wonder, did they conjure something?
Yeah.
They were obviously doing some things that even if they didn't think this would work, to me, that's the equivalent of playing with a Ouija board.
Sure.
It's just a game. It's not real. And then next thing Zozo's knocking on your door.
Yep. Uh-oh.
Yeah. And so maybe it was a situation like this. Maybe they thought it was all fun and games. It's a reason for us to bring prostitutes down here and have these huge outlandish parties and get totally drunk and do whatever else we want and pretend we're worshiping the devil. And, maybe we kill a few cats and, maybe we screw up and we kill, one of our guests, and I'm not making light of that, but I mean, it's the 1700s. I mean, a wealthy guy kills a common woman, they just kind of brush it under the rug.
Yeah.
I mean, it was just the way things were. Maybe they did bring something through.
Maybe.
And maybe it's stuck down in those caves. And maybe it's just to the point where it just wants to make itself known, It doesn't want to harm anybody. It'd probably rather you didn't go down there, but after a while, maybe I'm going to do something that's going to make you leave.
Yep.
But what do you believe? I mean, we're talking about, essentially a secret society that very little is known, but the evidence that they existed and some of the things that they did is there. And, if Dashwood was just building a fancy boys club, he sure did do it in a very strange way.
Right.
To dig an entire network of caves strictly to go have a party there. I mean, come on.
There's easier ways.
There's a lot of easier ways. I mean, he was wealthy. He could have built a whole other house and done it. I mean, he could have done anything. Why the caves? Why be underground to do these kind of things? Makes you wonder. Why have essentially a flowing river underneath and, it's the river Styx. I mean, they had to take a boat to get to the inner temple. You don't anymore, but they did then because of the amount of water that was down there. I mean, it's really strange. I mean, it's very, very interesting. And the people that were known members of this club were not just rich folks. They were influential members of society. I mean, like we said at the beginning, Dashwood was a member of Parliament. The fourth Earl of Sandwich was a member. Which sounds crazy to say.
The Grand Master of the
Funk.
The Grand Master of the Masons.
Oh, yeah.
Was a member.
Yeah. So, I mean, these people, they not only had money, they had power, and they had influence. So this was not just a bunch of guys just deciding, hey, let's just hang out. We'll play some games. We'll do some weird stuff. We'll bring some prostitutes over. It'll be fun. There was something way more.
They were doing
something way more to this.
Right.
There was way more. I feel like, whether or not they were successful, who knows? But, the history is there to make you think, yeah, they were up to something.
So, like we said, what do you guys think? Do any of y'all live near, Mount Pillier or the Hellfire Caves or anything like that? Have any of y'all taken that tour? Do y'all believe something really did go on with the Hellfire Club, or do you think it's all hyped up legend from, a fancy boys club? Let us know. Hit us up on Facebook or Twitter or Instagram, or just email us or hit us up on our website. You can drop a note to us on the website. We get a lot of messages that way, and it shoots it over to our email. So just hit us up and let us know what you think.
Yeah, and the website is graveyardpodcast.com. And among contacting us, you can take a look at some pictures of us. You can learn more about us. You can listen to the show. You can find links to purchase Graveyard Tales merchandise, and you can become a patron. Please go and rate and review us on iTunes. I know we say this just about every show, but it is the easiest way to bring more people into the graveyard. If you haven't already, check out our Facebook group. Just search for Graveyard Tales on Facebook. It is an amazing community of people. We have a great time. We cut up, we laugh, but I'm reading stories pretty much on the daily where people are having something that they just don't know how to deal with, and they don't know who they can talk to, but it's a safe place. You can ask for advice and you're going to get it. And, Adam and I just think it's fantastic.
Yeah. Our members are great.
It's fantastic. So guys, thank you so much for listening. And until next time, we'll save you a seat in the graveyard.
See you soon.
It's easy to support Murderific. Subscribe to the podcast on iTunes, Spotify, Podbean, or wherever you listen. Follow me on social media on Instagram at Murderific Podcast or Twitter at Murderific BPC. Like what you hear? Rate us 5 stars on iTunes and tell a friend.
Hello and welcome to the Murderific True Crime Podcast, featuring your host, Bernadette.
Content warning. The Murderific True Crime Podcast contains offensive language and will have information about kidnappings, torture, murder and sexual assault. It is inappropriate for children or the faint of heart.
Hi everyone, welcome to Murderific episode 24. And I'm here today with Casey.
Howdy folks.
Who's been a guest a lot and was a guest for episode, what was it? Ray Caruth.
Ray Caruth.
Way back in the day, episode 18.
Jolly Jane, Patreon, and several others. Plus, I'm your guest in real life as your husband.
You're a guest star.
Capitalize STAR, yes.
So, what's new?
Oh, not too much. It's kind of the same old, same old. We did get a riding lawnmower. That was pretty cool. Oh my God,
that is big news.
I haven't been so excited to mow the lawn ever.
So, we also got a deck, which is in marital land. That's a big deal because now it's the same thing as sitting on the grass, but you're like 3 inches up and you feel superior to everybody.
Especially the ants.
Right.
Definitely superior to the ants and in Maine, the deer ticks and all the other things that roam about.
We're way more superior than those bugs.
Yeah, we could probably get overtaken by them at some point, but until that happens and the movie is made, we'll just assume our deck is protecting us.
All right, so today's episode is about Randall Woodfield, another sports one for you.
Perfect.
He was the I-5 killer, or the I-5 bandit. The I-5 killer committed many, many crimes. Too many to count. Acts of armed robbery, sexual assault, rapes, and murders on the Interstate 5, a 500-mile stretch through Washington, Oregon, and California, which is the upper left corner of America, for those of you who don't know your maps.
For those Australian listeners.
This was in the late 70s, early 80s, a time when serial killers pretty much had free reign.
Yeah, you look at all the 70s killers, the big ones like Dahmer and...
Dahmer was not 70s, but
yeah, he started late 70s.
Oh yeah, you're right. Oh my God, I stand corrected.
Anyway, that aside, Kaczynski, late 70s. They kind of both came in the same time. And when was our buddy Ted Bundy?
80s.
He probably started in the 70s.
He started when he was a baby.
Yeah. He was killing right from the womb almost.
The murder victim count is anywhere from 18 to 44. And that's a lot. I've never even heard of this guy until recently. And that doesn't even count the rapes and robberies. Some say that he's committed up to 150 crimes altogether.
I bet it's actually very much higher than that because they probably didn't even list all the times that he was flashing his private parts.
His junks.
His penis.
His, what do they call it? His twig and berries.
He did that probably several hundred times alone.
His crimes were all sexually motivated, obviously. He killed people he knew and strangers. He preferred petite women in their 20s. Randall Brent Woodfield happened to come from a well-known and respected family. He was very good-looking for the time, vain. He was a ladies' man who played college football and had a short stint with the Green Bay Packers.
Yes, he's ugly in today's standard. Right. He was very good-looking for the time.
Unlike other serial killers who have cool-off times between their murders, Woodfield's crimes, when he started murdering, came on fast, and he escalated his behaviors rapidly. Despite all of his advantages in life, he became a remorseless sociopath serial killer, one of the deadliest killers in U.S. history. And this is his story.
Early life. He was born December 26, 1950, in Salem, Oregon. He was the third child of an upper-middle-class family. The family was well respected in the community. His two older sisters became a doctor and a lawyer. His dad had a managerial job at the phone company, Pacific Northwest Bell. His mom was a stay-at-home mom and a bit of a perfectionist. His two older sisters would babysit him. It was a very normal, almost boring upbringing, at least compared to other serial killers. He had no bedwetting behaviors, no abuse in his family, no neglect. He was popular in school. He was a football star in his high school in Newport and Portland State University. He was 6 feet tall, hardly any body fat, well-defined muscles, and a porn mustache. He was very confident with lots of girlfriends. He was very egotistical.
During his teenage years, he began showing disturbing behaviors. At 13, he was already a peeping Tom. He started exposing himself in junior high and was arrested for indecent exposure in high school. He was a football star in high school, though, and his football coaches covered up a few incidents of Randy's behavior, such as one time he was standing on a bridge exposing himself to females. He went to a therapist because of this behavior at his parents' urging. Nobody really took those things very seriously back then, like streaking was a thing and peeping Tom was a thing, and nobody made a big deal about it. But really, now we know that that behavior is a warning sign.
Yeah, back in the 70s, man, that was just, he exposed himself. All right, Randy, put your penis away. Go to bed.
Go to bed.
And, just don't do it again, okay? Sure, okay. So then again, the day later, he's out there exposing himself again. And there was no jail time or anything for that.
No. In fact, when Woodfield turned 18, his juvenile record was expunged, which set him up for college.
When an NFL scout came to see Randy in high school, they were impressed with his hands and athleticism. Quote, Randy runs decent routes and he's good to the outside. Quote, they wrote down things mostly about his speed. He ended up playing for Portland State football with a team called the Vikings. The coaches and teammates and friends of Woodfield all have varying stories about him. Seems like he was a different person to everyone that he met. Some said he was quiet and a bit odd. Some people thought he was off. The freshman quarterback at PSU in 1973 said about Randy, quote, he really didn't fit in. He'd make out-of-the-blue statements that were off the wall, end quote. Charles Staudemeyer said, quote, Randall was very vain. He was always grooming himself. That even carried over to the way he played. He seemed like he was interested in looking cute out there than getting the job done, end quote. One of Randy's coaches in college, Gary Hamblett, said, quote, he was the nicest, most gentlemanly kid I ever knew, end quote. In fact, when a reporter called the coach years later and asked if he had heard about Randall Woodfield being the I-5 killer, he said, quote, that can't be. Probably the wrong Randall Woodfield, end quote.
Another teammate who didn't want to say his name said, quote, he was a little strange, maybe stranger than we thought. You just had a bad